You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 373 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he comes to us high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy. Thanks for asking.
It is a beautiful night in Chicago.
Sure
The
is.
Cubs are not playing baseball today. It is an off Monday. And to help us recap the week that was, we'll go over some news and preview the week that will be. You know him from his work at NBC Chicago, longtime friend of the show, James Neveau. Thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Anytime I get the invitation from Jeremy Deemer to jump on this podcast, I have to mull it very strongly and, consider it for multiple days and then, dignify it with a response. No, I jump at it every time. Let's not kid ourselves here. Good to see you guys tonight.
I always appreciate when the response is positive, and because the time flies and we always have a great time when we're talking Cubs with James. And let's talk about the week that was. Only 5 games this week, 3-2 for the Cubs. And I think we were pretty accurate in our predictions last week, Pat.
3-2. Yeah. Sadly, the way it played out was not ideal, but yes.
It was not how we predicted. No, I think a lot of us thought that we would see a split with the Dodgers. Instead, a sweep, and Cubs were riding high. And then the Phillies come to town, and the Cubs win that Friday game before dropping the next 2, including the Sunday night game.
The frustrating Sunday loss, which has become a regular habit here for the Cubs.
It definitely has. Last week against Arizona, 3 weeks ago then against the Padres. Yeah, just
Arizona before that.
Yeah, not a good record on the Sundays for the Cubs, but they did beat the Dodgers on a Sunday, and beating the Dodgers is something the Cubs got pretty good at here as April was wrapping up. Good news, though, James, we don't have to see the Dodgers anymore this season.
Yeah, I think that was kind of a great microcosm of just what we've come to expect from the Cubs in all of these really tough games that they've played. I think that we looked at the schedule when the season began and we're like, okay, this is going to be a rough stretch. Everybody kind of assumed, but I don't know if we quite just knew the constant punch that would be accompanying these games, playing 7 against Arizona, 7 against LA, 6 against Arizona, sprinkle in some games against Texas and against Philly in there, and just an absolutely brutal stretch of the schedule. And I think if you had looked at it and said to yourself, the Cubs are going to make it through this stretch in April in first place in the division, leading baseball in runs scored, and be getting some really strong starting pitching, probably from some really unexpected guys like Matthew Boyd and Colin Ray, you'd have been like, I will take that 1,000 times out of 10. And yet there are still games that, linger in the memory. The Arizona games that they blew on the Sundays, the game against San Diego, the game against Philly on Sunday nights. It's so weird to think back at just big picture how well they've played and how much we would have taken this, when you realize that it could have even been a game or two better. It's kind of hilarious to think of it that way. But honestly, a lot of stuff to be positive about. Definitely some questions coming out of it. But I think overall, if you had told me this was where we were going to be at this point in the season, I'd have been very satisfied with it.
Yeah, the Cubs, Boyd, one of the pitchers in victory against the Dodgers. The other was the game that Imanaga pitched, Pat. Just a all around, it couldn't have gone any better.
No, I think the Dodgers are the ones who are happy not to have to play the Cubs in the United States of America, because when they do, they get shellacked. It was nice to see. We've talked on previous week's podcast about how the Cubs have yet to steal a game from somebody, but we've had games stolen from us and how frustrating that is. I'm not sure if it's really a steal or not, but the game the Cubs played against the Dodgers earlier this week, where the Cubs took an early lead and then squandered it, and the Dodgers looked like they were in control of the game, and the Cubs came back and won the game, may go down as, I'm sure if you're a Dodgers fan, you probably felt like the game got stolen from you. And it's nice to see the usual suspects, right? It's it's Kyle Tucker and Pete Armstrong, et cetera, who are sort of lighting the fuse behind the Cubs' performances. And, I'm here for it.
Yeah, when they put up, the Dodgers put up 5 runs in the top of the 7th, and they had it was 7-2 lead at that point. Yeah, it felt like a comeback may not be happening for the Cubs, and they turned around and did it. You mentioned Kyle Tucker, another guy who's been instrumental in all of these victories has been Pete Armstrong, James. PCA, he's exceeding all my expectations when it came to hitting. He was incredibly frustrating last year, and to see any sort of offense, especially what he's been doing lately, has been just super exciting.
Yeah, I think that the thing with Pete Armstrong is whenever you saw like I have to be kind of the old man in the room and say when you see like the hairstyle that he was rolling along with, or just the confidence that he carries himself with, it does kind of scream, the Javi Baez effect, where like he just has like a certain swagger that you can't quite underestimate. But then he's been going out, especially lately, and we always knew he was going to tear games up on the base paths. He was going to figure out the best ways to utilize that speed. He's matured very quickly in that department, I will add. Obviously, an incredible fielder. We knew that he could throw the ball. We knew he could go down and catch anything that's hit out there, basically. I think that the one thing that I've just been genuinely surprised by has just been kind of the effortless power that he's been showing. And I know the Cubs have been kind of loath to move him up in the lineup. They've still had him batting 7th yesterday, and he had the only RBI in the game. But just the way that he's adjusted at the plate, they flagged yesterday, he moved back in the box. I think that's been very key in getting the ball to him, just that touch slower, enabling him to get the bat on it and to make things happen. I mean, talk about things that if you had told me before the season that he'd be tied for, or he'd have the second best WAR in the National League so far this season, I would have taken that in a heartbeat. That guy has been just unbelievable. And like I said, that swagger that he's playing with, it is very refreshing to see that. And as you alluded to, Jeremy, just the fact that he struggled last season, but then kind of slowly started to figure it out in the way he's kind of burst out of the gates lately. Man, that's such a huge thing for the Cubs as they move forward in this process.
Certainly hitting .421 with 2 homers and 2 doubles and 4 steals this week was a nice compliment to his fast early start. I will say I'm a little bit concerned still about the strikeout rate and the contact issues. When he's making contact, he's crushing the ball, which is great. Let's hope he doesn't start hitting into weak contact and also striking out 30% of the time, because that's what we saw last year after the great August, when he kind of backslid a little bit in September. But between the running, the base running, and the defense, he can keep that WAR up no matter what, because he provides other things that are helpful to the team. But before we leave that Dodgers series, I do want to point out how great was it to see Miguel Amaya with 2 outs in the 9th inning. I mean, people rarely give Jed Hoyer credit for the 8-dimensional chess he plays, but to bid up Tanner Scott, the closer for the Dodgers, only to, quote, lose him to the Dodgers, and then feeding right into our own hands. I mean, they were such suckers. He comes into the 9th and gets the first 2 outs, and I appreciate both Horner and PCA making outs in that 9th inning to lull him into a false sense of security, only to have Miguel Amaya blast one into center field for the game-tying home run. And, of course, one of my favorite things in extra innings these days is to be the home team, not to give up any runs in the top of the inning. And then just the first batter gets a base hit and the game's over. That's let's not drag this out. And so the Cubs were able to pull that one out. And that was huge, because given the rest of the games they had coming up this week, including the next day, which I was not super confident they would win, although turns out I should have been a little bit more confident. I didn't realize that the Cubs would handcuff the Dodger hitters the way they did, which was impressive, I thought. But they managed to do it. Ohtani in particular has been basically helpless against Cub pitchers the last 5 games we played them. We did begin a little bit of a disturbing trend in the Dodger series that didn't cost us any games, but then ended up hurting us in the Philadelphia series. it felt like every relief pitcher in the bullpen decided to have like one inning where they had their worst inning of the year. Like Keller had the tough inning, and in that first Dodgers game, I forget who it was. Somebody did in the next Dodgers game. It's been a sore spot for the Cubs we've talked about before, but it's getting the bullpen righted. When they are good, they're like the Friday game, then it's great. But we've had a lot of blow ups here, and we'll get into that, I guess, a little bit more. But all in all, you can't ask for more than winning both games, and not just to win them, but as we know, there were tons of Dodgers fans there in attendance.
We saw the parade. We saw the march down Clark Street.
Yeah. Who knew that they were marching to the slaughterhouse, but like cows. But it was a playoff atmosphere for sure. I mean, this is what it feels like to be in the playoffs. I remember beating the Dodgers at Wrigley Field in the playoffs a couple of years ago in 2016 and humiliating them in the NLCS. And it felt a lot like that in terms of the energy and the vibe in the stadium, which I'm sure if you're like a Kyle Tucker, for example, and you're looking at your watch and it's like 23rd of April and you're in this like manic crazed stadium watching, playing baseball, you must be like, wow, so this is what it's like, huh? I'm used to being in the Houston, Orange Juice Dome or whatever. And it's just not quite the same.
The Minute Maid Mausoleum.
Yes.
I wanted to say, like, that was one of my favorite quotes from the entire week. I think it was Nico Horner, who has been here for quite a while at this point. Remembered Ian Happ talking about the atmosphere at Wrigley Field and what it was like when the Cubs were really kind of on that roll and were winning a lot of games and they were being successful in the playoffs. And he's like, I'm really glad that we kind of have gotten a little taste of that now, because Ian talked about it all the time, and man, is it great. And he's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, the atmosphere in April is something special for a team that hasn't been to the playoffs in as long as the Cubs are. Like, a lot of times you get teams that had deep runs in the playoffs. They sell a lot of season tickets the next year, and you get a lot of people going to these April games. A lot of the teams that are really good, but the Cubs haven't been good. And they packed a lot of people in for a lot of these games in April. When the weather hasn't been great, it's been cold some of these nights. This was a really impressive atmosphere, and I love the we all hope that Kyle Tucker appreciates the environment, and we're all trying to do our part. Now we just need ownership to try and extend the guy.
Get Pete Crow Armstrong an extension too while you're at it. I mean, I think
they tried.
there had been that talk about
trying to get him
under deal for what, $75 million. Like,
yeah,
that would have been great if they could have gotten him to agree to that. But I'm not positive that's going to happen. I still think that's something that you continue to kick the tires on, because I think there is something to be said for having some security, especially in the face of kind of the labor uncertainty that we're going to be facing. And obviously him being a younger guy, probably not as worried about it, but still worth like at least considering. And I'm not just saying that because he's had a good 2 weeks. I'm saying that because I think it's good business.
Absolutely. And the Cubs' success rolled right into that Friday game against the Phillies, where Colin Ray pitched 5 innings scoreless, only giving up 3 hits, striking out 7. Colin Ray, of all people, Pat, is having success here.
Look, I think if there's one thing we had consensus on coming into the season, it's that Colin Ray would work his way into the starting rotation and keep his ERA under 1 run per 9 innings.
I remember Jeremy saying that. Yeah,
sounds right.
That's played out according to plan. No, it's been not just a godsend, but it's been without his performances the last 4 games, Cubs would be in a lot of trouble. I hope he can continue to stretch himself. I know he pitched like through 92 pitches in 5 innings. It'd be nice, like with all the starters, if they could get a 6th inning, for God's sake. But you can't ask for much more than yet another shutout in the 5 innings he did pitch, and so that was great. And then how about Palencia? We talked about Porter Hodge as a possible closer candidate, or Ben Brown, and here's Palencia, who's apparently, and I did not know this, but at Wrigley, you are allowed to throw a fastball in the ninth inning over 90 miles an hour.
Who
In
knew?
fact, he was throwing it over 100 miles an hour, and it was refreshing to see. And it was a good all around effort by the bullpen, including our new friend who we briefly mentioned on the podcast last week, Drew Pomerantz, who threw a scoreless inning as the setup man in the eighth inning. Just to show
Welcome
you the
back to the major
bullpen
leagues.
Right
Yeah, welcome back.
Right. First time in 5 years, and here you are in the eighth inning of a 4-run game. So all was good.
I do have to say, if we're going to bring up the bullpen, I do have to give credit where it's due to Ryan Presley, who really has,
Sure.
he was walking everybody early in the season and recently has been so much better in that way. I think he has one base runner allowed his last 6 times out. That's the Ryan Presley we need to see. And it's not like he's doing this against, bad competition. So as long as Palencia and Hodge continue to do what they're doing, I would love to continue just having that debate while Ryan Presley goes out and limits base runners and gets guys to hit, weak contact. That'd be really nice.
The last 2 games against the Phillies were incredibly frustrating. First, because we've mentioned on the show here, the Phillies are the bizarro Cubs. They're the Cubs that could have been. Bryce Harper, of course, in 2018. We all thought that was a done deal. I was at the Vegas Golden Knights game, the same game that a couple sections in front of me, Chris Bryant and was sitting right next to Bryce Harper, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the future, and never came to be. Trey Turner, we were just banging the drum for the Cubs when they needed a shortstop to go get that guy. Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos.
It's too bad we never had those 2 guys, huh?
It goes on and on, right? And then it really hit me when I'm watching Luzardo pitch on Saturday. I'm like, oh my gosh, how many podcasts did we do speculating about what Luzardo to the Cubs would be? And it was real close to being a done deal. And here he is dominating the Cubs.
It turns out, probably, but. Yeah, no, Schwarber and Castellanos, each with OPSs over 900. I mean, that's, it's the bats, Schwarber in particular, the left-handed power bat the Cubs needed the last couple of years. Probably would have been the difference between making the playoffs or not. Certainly 2 years ago, maybe even last year. And it is the bizarro Phillies. And frustratingly, certainly on Saturday, Ben Brown had a poor start. Craig Counsell, what was his quote after the game? He's like, yeah, we expect more out of Ben than that. He's not happy with the outing. And then, one of our favorites, Ethan Roberts, had his bad inning too. So it's like the Cubs just couldn't catch a break there. It's there's always not always, but each bullpen member has had at least one game this year where they've just gotten completely obliterated. And that was Ethan's chance. Although by then it probably didn't even matter that much. So at least he did it turned out to be a blowout game, but and it was really the Sunday game. You figure you beat the Phillies the first time, you had the Brown as a bad outing the second game. You're like, okay, we get it, but let's come back and win the rubber match and end this week 4-1. What a nice finish that would have been, and they just couldn't get it done. Even though Jameson Taillon pitched, fairly well, I thought. In 7 innings, gave up 1 run, didn't walk anybody, which was nice to see. And then, but that was, this is when Julian Merriweather decided he couldn't, get any walk. He walked the 3 runners, and we had the unfortunate play at third base by a non-third baseman. It's just some of this stuff kind of feels like it's a little bit of a broken record from years past, but that was a game that they kind of slipped away.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the expected batting averages for some of the Cubs in the game. I think Nico Horner had a double play that it was like an 870 expected batting average, and it was a double play. Like you had, I think later in the game, I'm trying to remember who it was, had another one that was like 700 batting average and just got, innocently caught. Pete Crow Armstrong had a line out that was like an 850 as well. Like the Cubs hit the ball hard several times during that game and just could not get it to fall. And that's, going to happen at some point. But I was also thinking the same thing you were thinking, Pat, where it was just watching Julian Merriweather. It was like, bro, they're not chasing those pitches. You need to get them a little bit closer to the zone, adjust strategy, do something, flash them, whatever it's going to take. And he just couldn't seem to figure it out. And yet he still only managed to give up 2 runs through all of that. Like, it was kind of mind-boggling that the Cubs even had like a remote possibility of still winning that game after how badly he pitched. But I looked at, I think it was ESPN at the stat, the Phillies have won like 11 of their last 14 against the Cubs. And I just was like screaming at my TV as SportsCenter started, like, tell them why. It's because literally everybody on that team wants revenge on the Cubs for not signing them. Like, that's literally like the easiest narrative that has ever existed. And just all of those guys just routinely love beating up on the Cubs. And also, I did want to mention one other thing. Did you guys see the stats? The day the Pope died, how much money was bet on Nick Castellanos to hit a home run, and he did not. So, unfortunately for bettors, the Pope's death did not result in a payday. But the streak
is over. The
streak
is over.
Killed me when I saw that report that there was like the most prop bet in Vegas that day, and he did not hit a home run.
Can you name the only professional sports franchise in either Major League Baseball, the NFL, or the NBA not to make the playoffs during Pope Francis's reign?
The New York Jets.
That's correct. It was a 6-year reign, I think, right? So Jets, Jets. Yeah, the only one.
I believe that is accurate. Yeah, I think it was because it's been, I think, like 14 years since the Jets made the playoffs. I think it was like the Mark Sanchez vintage, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Jeremy, are you concerned about any particular Cub members of their lineup, any of the hitters we have here? We talk a lot about pitching, but is there anybody in the lineup who's starting to maybe raise an eyebrow for you?
You know, I was I was thinking, hey, Kyle Tucker has struggled only because he is playing like a normal human being right now, and he was out of the stratosphere, now playing like a normal person, but the Cubs need him to be just like the superstar in that lineup. Holy cow. Between, this weekend, it was, there's just a gaping hole at third base. Everything at third base is I'm scratching my head of what can you do next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honestly, like correct me if I'm wrong here, but is Matt Shaw still like the best option at third base, considering you have a guy like, Vidal just could not, can't hit very well, and also just cannot field apparently. Gage Workman got ejected, is now with the White Sox. You're welcome for that, I guess, Chicago. And I know that, like, with all of his struggles at the plate, the one thing that Matt Shaw could do is he occasionally got on base because he's got a good hitting eye. He walked quite a bit when he was here, and he's doing the same thing down in the minor leagues. I think he already has,
just hit a home run.
He has 12 walks in 7 games. Down there.
He's starting to get his swing back, and I think they'll probably want to give him another week, maybe 2 to kind of get that. But I think too long.
No,
right?
I was going to say, you literally cannot keep throwing games away by having all of these guys do this. And I don't know if the plan was ever to let Justin Turner play third base, but dear God, please don't go down that path. That guy is 43 at bats, no extra base hits, and yet Craig Counsell insists on continuing to bat him third when he plays. Like,
so weird.
All the no's for that. Like, I completely agree with you, Pat. Like, they're going to get Shaw up here. It wouldn't shock me if he was up here for the next homestand. I feel like after the road trip, I think they're finally going to be like, if he's still drawing walks, getting some good contact down in Iowa, I can definitely see a scenario where they get him back up here. If nothing else, because he provides a competent glove and he draws walks even if he's not getting hits.
Yeah, with Patrick Wisdom leading the Japanese league in home runs right now.
I saw so many people online who were like, you guys ran Patrick Wisdom out of town, and where would you be if you had him now? And I was like, probably still pissed off, but
he'd be hitting about 215, but he'd have like 5 or 6 homers, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that would at least be useful.
Yeah.
And while some of the positives that came out of the game, the Sunday, the double play between Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson, spectacular highlight reel double play. Dansby Swanson, another guy who has been struggling of late. He's another guy that you want to see some more offensive production from.
Early in the year, well, first of all, the first week of the year, he was doing well. I don't know what happened, first 3 games. And then it seemed like he was hitting the ball pretty hard, but just at people and getting good exit velocity and all that jazz, right? And so you're like, okay, I'm not worried. And then the last couple of weeks, he's really looked bad at the plate. And I don't want to get too alarmist about it, but with the Pirates coming up, minus the Skeens game and some other easier teams, no more excuses. Like, if you're hurt, stop playing. I don't want any of this like, oh, I was hurt for 3 months. That's why I hit 180. No, 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 no. You can't after the fact I was hurt nonsense anymore, right? If you're hurt, stop playing. If you're not hurt, which I assume he's not, right? Because we haven't been told he is, then you got to hit a little bit. I hate to say it, but yeah, he is the highest paid player on the team. He wasn't brought in because he was going to be the difference maker, cleanup hitter like a Kyle Tucker would be. But I think the expectation was always that he would do more than he has the last year and a month, right? Hitting 181 is not going to cut it, I think. An OPS of 550 is not going to cut it. I don't care how good a shortstop you are. So he needs to up his game there, and hopefully he's a veteran, so I'm sure they give him a long leash. But it especially, I think, is difficult when you've got weak production out of third base right next to you.
That's the thing, yeah.
And it's been great, to have we joke about all the time about the catchers hitting so well, and it's great to have Bush with a decent start and Ian Happ starting to hit and Tucker and Suzuki and PCA. But, those guys, like you said, Jeremy, they cool off. Everybody does at some point. And, this is when we're going to need Swanson to start performing. Like last Sunday was a great example. Top 5 guys in the order, hitless. It happens, right? Nola's a tough pitcher, but that would have been a great game for Swanson to kind of get off the schneid, and was unable to do so. And so please do that.
I do want to point out that PCA almost has a better slugging percentage than Swanson has an OPS. Like that is royally bad. And then I also will point out Dansby Swanson has at least one strikeout in 15 straight games. That is bananas when you see that game log and you look at what he did during the homestand. He was 7 of 33. He struck out 14 times. Dansby, if you're not going to hit the ball out of the ballpark, you cannot strike out in half of your at-bats. That's not going to work. And
he's got 33 strikeouts in 22 games this year, right? He's striking out in 89 at-bats, so he's striking out over 35% of the time.
That's just not good enough. And there's no planet where your defense can overcome that kind of deficiency. And also, I will add, why not move Miguel Amaya, Pete Crow Armstrong? Why not just move them ahead of Dansby? And I know you want to get the lineup turned over. That's completely understandable, but you also don't want to have a complete black hole in the middle of your lineup either. Like, I think at a certain point, something's going to have to give, and they're going to have to rejigger something there. And, like you said, Pat, if he's hurt, slide Nico over to shortstop, get somebody else to play second base, and figure this out, because this is absolutely not sustainable.
So the last thing we'll talk about here before we move on to the week that will be, we talked about, let's close the book on the pitching as we talked about the hitting. The pitching side, we talked about Colin Ray this week, although no Justin Steele is going to become a problem. We need to see the Cubs do something about that sooner rather than later. I don't think this is something, James, that you can wait till the trade deadline to address. This has to be addressed real soon. And I don't know, is it an internal option? Is there anything that they can do, or do they have to go outside and make a deal here?
What it feels like they're doing is they're trying to wait as long as they can to let Cade Horton build up as much as he can before they bring him up here. He's still kind of building the arm back up. He's looked really solid in AAA. Like you don't want him wasting too many bullets down there, but you also don't want to get him up here before he's fully stretched out and fully ready. And I think that the Cubs are kind of taking advantage of the fact that they're playing good baseball right now to kind of justify a little bit more patient approach to them to really let them stretch it out. I think that's ultimately going to be your ideal answer, is going to be to have him come up But beyond that, it's like, what are their internal options right now with Javier Assad getting shut back down? You could have Jordan Wicks maybe try to get a spot in the rotation. It's not like he looked great out of the bullpen, but hasn't looked bad as a starter down in Iowa. Like that's, maybe the starting is better for him, whatever, you make of that. I think that that's a decent option, but you kind of look beyond that and just kind of what's maybe out there on the trade block or whatever. And I don't see them trying to swing a trade at this point for like a Sandy Alcantara. I don't think that occurs until later in the year. What do you try to like poach a middle of the road starter from the White Sox if they're hoping to get like a prospect up to do some pitching for them? Like that's kind of the field you're going to have to play in right now if you want to address this from outside of the organization, or if another team wants to DFA a starter and you want to take a flyer on them, kind of like a Drew Pomeranz situation where the Mariners are like, we don't know if we're going to, give you a roster spot. And the Cubs are like, we'll do it. Me right here. Like that's the only other situation I can really see playing out. But I think your internal options are basically limited to Cade Horton and then, swallow real hard and call Jordan Wicks up. And that second option just is not that palatable to me.
We were really hopeful as recent as a week ago that Assad would be up. That was the big hope, and we were kind of counting on him. And with the injury now, probably keeping him out for potentially even like 2 months. I mean,
for those who aren't aware, he re-aggravated his left oblique during a rehab start in AAA, so he's been shut down again. Yeah.
Let's put it this way: if the Cubs are not going to call up Cade Horton by the end of May, then they need to make a move, in the month of May to get a real pitcher, because that is something, that is a spot they have to fill. And frankly, the Ben Brown experiment is on shaky ground as a starter. I don't really see the difference between at this point having him or Wicks starting, because it feels like when Brown is most effective, he throws a lot of pitches, so he doesn't go very deep into games. We've seen Wicks in his starts last year, even when he was effective, not go super deep into games. Same reason. Mm-hmm. I'd almost rather have Brown in the back of the bullpen, because he has an alternate benefit to there. Whereas Wicks, in his limited action in the bullpen in that dramatic Arizona game, looked less than stellar. Although the circumstances that day were not great for pitching, but still, it almost makes you wish. You laugh when you think about it, but it almost makes you wish you could bring up a Hayden Wisniewski or somebody, but he's gone. They traded him.
Yeah.
Justifiably, but it's that type of arm, I guess, that they're missing, and it is kind of frustrating that at this point of the farm system development, that the Cubs don't have more guys who they can bring up, homegrown pitchers who they can bring up. I mean, we talk about Justin Steele; he was drafted in like 2014 or something. That was a long time ago, and right now, who in the Cubs rotate? I mean, they've got some free agents like Tyon and they got Imanaga and whatnot and Boyd, but Brown came through a trade. But who have they developed? I mean, Wicks was a number 1 draft pick, right? And we have not gotten out of him what we had hoped at this point. And who knows? I mean, at this, I don't think that the expectation anybody has right now is that he's going to be a top 1, 2, 3 starter. What's his ceiling right now? A 4th starter in Major League Baseball if everything goes right? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Cade Horton's
Cubs love
really
those. Plenty of room on the Cubs roster for a 4th starter. We love those.
all the eggs are in the Cade Horton basket right now. They traded 2 pretty good pitching prospects to get Michael Busch. They traded Wisniewski, so there's not a whole lot left in the cupboard right now. So let's hope that happens. If not, they're going to have to go out and get somebody, because this is not probably sustainable. And I worry, obviously Steele's out, but I worry about Boyd's ability to pitch an entire season.
Yeah. Good call. Yeah.
Would be something new or to him.
Different.
It just really stinks looking at just the health of some of the guys too. You look at like a Brandon Birdsell, he would have been, another potential option, and he hasn't pitched yet this season with that. I think he had a lat injury during spring training, if I remember right. So even options like that, like him and the Jack Neelys of the world, it's like they really are just kind of having to rely so hard on Cade Horton right now. But I can't imagine a scenario where he isn't up at some point in May. I think that as soon as Justin Steele went down, that was the default plan. They just wanted to try to let it go as long as they could, take advantage of the days off that they have, maybe take advantage of a little bit weaker schedule here coming up. But you got to imagine they're not just going to want him languishing in Des Moines until July. Like, that's just not going to be the way the Cubs need to handle this. I think that he's ultimately the answer, but getting from point A to point B is certainly going to be an interesting exercise, especially as they get into a part of their schedule where they're not going to have as many days off.
Yeah, I mean, they've been really fortunate. They've got 3 days off in 8 days right now. So that's helped a little bit. Teams have been much more aggressive about calling up young pitchers than they used to be. You know, this whole notion they have to throw so many innings at each level is out the window. Guys get hurt so quickly. It's like, bring them up now before they do. I will just say, if anything happens to Managa, the Cubs are toast right now. But knock on wood, that won't be the case. Although, did you see how, like, days later, they called the Ohtani grounder, and they called it a hit. It was originally scored as an error. They switched it to a hit, giving Imanaga 3 more earned runs. It's like anything you can do to help Ohtani, whether it's, you know, catching home runs that are 5 feet short of the fence, or giving credit for a base hit 4 days later that was really an error. But yeah, poor Imanaga. I felt bad for him on that one.
You will never convince me they don't use juiced baseballs for Shohei Ohtani. You will not convince me of it. I recognize that he's a hell of a talent and he makes really solid contact all the time, but there are some home runs that like are wall scrapers that I'm like, I don't know if he's maybe playing with a little bit of a stacked deck on his behalf. But again, that's just kind of a wild conjecture thing.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. The conspiracy theories from the James Neveau basement.
Please don't sue me.
Well, let's look ahead to the week that will be for the Cubs as we close out the month of April, which I feel like is one of the longest months ever. Like, there's been a lot of baseball. I feel like we've already done like a month's worth of podcasts, and here we are finally closing out April as the Cubs turn the page on the month they're actually going to start playing teams in their own division. We welcome the NL Central as they play 3 games at Pittsburgh, followed by 3 games at Milwaukee. And yeah, the Cubs again through the month of May, much like April, don't work on Thursdays, and they will continue to not work on Thursdays, although they don't have as many days off as we look at the Thursday calendar. As we look at the May calendar, it's only Thursday. That's the only day they have off. They're playing games all the rest of the time. So we've got 3 at Pittsburgh, 3 at the Brewers. Pat, you already started by saying, hey, if we, besides the Skeens game, that's something you would expect 2 out of 3 against these
no
Pirates?
pressure, but you got to win the first 2, don't you?
That's right.
If that's the third one, and that's a problem with Skeens, and with whenever you play the Pirates and you catch him like that, is that you're not guaranteed to win the series, because if you just split the other 2, you don't win this. A good chance you don't win the series. So
Cubs have Imanaga, Boyd, and then Colin Ray.
Yeah, so I feel comfortable that the Cubs can win 2 out of 3 in that series, but Skeens is not unbeatable, as you saw last year with the big comeback from behind win, if you remember that.
Well, the Pirates bullpen will continue to Pirates.
Right, so. Right. So make them throw out of pitches at least. I think the Cubs can win 2 out of 3 there. The Brewers series is going to be tricky, though. The Brewers are starting to play a little bit better, I think. It seems like it anyway to me.
At the time of this recording, the Brewers are 14-15, sitting in third place.
They did just lose 2 of 3 to the Cardinals and 3 of 4 to the Giants. So a little bit of a stumble, I think. Just a little, though.
Mm-hmm.
I see them. I think if the Cubs go 3-3 on this road trip against these 2 teams, that's a fair, especially given the health status of our pitching staff. I'd call that a win. 6 road games.
3-3. James, I'm looking for predictions and any your thoughts on the upcoming series.
I'm actually going to go 3-3 also. The Cubs are kind of running into a little bit of a challenge of pitching matchups in the Brewers series. And ironically, one of those could be Jose Quintana, who is 4-0 this season with a 1.14 ERA because everything the Brewers pick up from the Cubs seems to just work out beautifully for them. So it's just one of those stupid things. They're going to have to face Quintana in the series. I think they have to face Peralta in the series. That just screams to me the Cubs are going to lose 2 of 3, one of which will be like an all right, fine kind of game, almost like Saturday against Philly, where it's like you're going to get got by that team at some point. And then they're going to have a Sunday-like performance where it's going to be like, God dang it, we could have won that stupid game, quieted down that stupid stadium, and you just couldn't do it. So I'm going to go 3-3 with one stupidly annoying loss against the Brewers. I think that's going to be the little bit more detailed prediction that I'll offer. The one good thing, though, the Cubs do have Shota Imanaga pitching twice. They have pitching in both series.
Nice.
Do they still refer to Quintana as the curse of Eloy Jimenez, or is that no longer a thing?
I'm pretty sure Eloy Jimenez is the curse of Eloy Jimenez.
He just got hurt when you said that, by the way. So
he had like another like sharp pain in his lat. Sorry about that, Eloy.
I'll make it unanimous. I do agree it'll be a 3-3 week. I do see the 2-1 against the Pirates and the 1-2 against the Brewers. However, if the Cubs do manage to take those first 2 games against the Pirates, that would mean that they were 19-12 for the month of April, which when we looked at that schedule, I would have took that. I thought 500 would be exciting to be 19-12. That would be absolutely spectacular. You couldn't ask for anything more.
The Cubs have the easiest record in baseball moving forward.
Yes, they do.
They have the hardest record looking backwards.
Yeah, that's incredible. Let's look ahead a little bit to the rest of the month. It's a lot of division matchups. I think the hardest competition here in the month of May.
They have like one stupid
the
stretch.
Mets. Yep. At the Mets. And then against you got a lot of Marlins, you got a lot of Rockies, and a lot of Cincinnati Reds, the White Sox for 3, and you have the Giants. So you have the Giants and Mets in 1 week. That's a tough stretch.
That'll be tough. And the Giants have been playing really well, and the Mets, I think, have lost 1 game at home. So that's going to be an annoying stretch. But outside of that, like you said, all those games against the Marlins and the White Sox and the Rockies, that's where you're just going to have to like really start beating up on some teams. Maybe that's the get right stretch for a Dansby Swanson. Maybe the weather gets warmer at Wrigley, plays a bunch of dog water teams. Maybe that's going to be the solution that finally gets this thing going in the right direction.
I feel like, if Dansby Swanson's still hitting 181 after that stretch, and if our starting pitchers can't make it into the 6th inning, then we have an endemic problem that needs fixing. But I think we'll start to see some of that correction occur.
And I look forward to being incredibly frustrated in all those Reds games. So we'll get to that in future podcasts.
They'll trade for Eugenio Suarez just to annoy us.
And now we will move to close the show as we do every week, where our guest chooses a former Cubs player for us to profile. And we profile that player the next week. So, James, you're on the clock. You have to think of a Cubs player for us to profile. As Pat tells us about this week's Cub, as selected last week by Jared Willis. This week's Cub is Carlos Marmol. And James, right, I'll put in the chat all the Cubs that have been taken, so you know who not to choose.
Really hitting hard this 2000 aughts era. Many of our podcast guests have been hitting this hard. Carlos Marmol, as you probably are aware, was signed by the Cubs in 2000 out of the Dominican Republic as a free agent. He was signed as a outfielder, shortstop, catcher. After 3 years of struggling in the minors, he converted to pitcher in 2003. In 2004 at Lansing, he pitched really well. He's a starting pitcher the very next year, 14-8 with a 3.20 ERA. The year after that, he went to Daytona, pitched really well, went to West Tennessee, started 2006 in West Tennessee, and was called up in the middle of the year when Glendon Rush was injured. You may remember that injury, Jeremy. So for a guy who didn't convert to pitcher till 2003, by 2006 he was in the major leagues. It's straight out of like a movie or something, right? Like that's not supposed to happen. I was going back through the stats. I barely remember Carlos Marmol from 2006. I really don't. That was kind of a throwaway year for the Cubs because by the time he got up there, the Cubs were terrible. Remember, they'd been good in 03, 04, 05. Sure. They were good again, 07, 08, 09, and 10. But there was this one year, it was a year Derek Lee broke his wrist, at the end of April, and they just collapsed. They lost 96 games. So by August, when Marmol comes up, or maybe it was end of July, it was in that area, it was kind of like, the season was kind of sliding by. He pitched in 19 games. He started 13 games as a Cub that year. He averaged, this is an unusual stat line, per 9 innings. He struck out 7 batters. He walked 7 batters, and he gave up 8 hits per 9, which did not lead to a great whip, nor did it lead to a great ERA. He was 5-7 with a 6.08 ERA for the year. So I didn't really give him a lot of thought, although he was 23 years old at the time. So, for a guy who converted to pitcher at the age of 20 to be in the big leagues at 23, again, better than
pretty incredible.
Yeah, then how old is Jordan Wicks? He's probably older than that now, right? So anyway, in 2007, however, and now keep in mind, Marmol started in the minors that year. He comes up to the majors on May 19th of 2007. 2007 turned out to be a good year for the Cubs, unexpectedly. The closer that year was Ryan Dempster, but Marmol was brought up to be a relief pitcher. Dempster had yet to transition into his role at Cubs Convention Bingo and was still doing the closer position. So he shows up in 2007. He goes he pitches 59 games, real workhorse. He goes 5-1 with a 143 earned run average. Talk about a revelation. He averaged, wait for it, 12.5 strikeouts per 9, better than 7. He kept his walks down, 4.5, per 9, which is on the high end, but it's not so bad when you only give up 5 hits per 9. He finished 26th in the most valuable player voting for a middle reliever who got brought up in May, right? May 19th, like 3 weeks from today, right? Like, I mean, imagine if Cade Horton comes up in 3 weeks from now and finishes in the MVP race. So a great season for him in 2007. He comes into 2008 fighting for a closer role. He loses the position to I think Padella wanted to go with Kerry Wood, who was the veteran pitcher at the time, which made sense to a lot of people. So Marmol again assumed his setup man role. Had a 2.68 ERA, saved 7 games, including Jeremy. I don't know if you recall this. Remember they made a big deal about this? I remember at the time it was the Cubs' 10,000th win. First team in baseball to win 10,000 games or something, and the Cubs were it. And he saved the game, yay! Because Kerry Wood blew it in the 9th, and he came back and saved it later on. He pitched 87. He pitched in 82 games, and he threw 87 innings, 114 strikeouts. That's very 80s like for a relief pitcher to strike out 114 batters. You don't see that very often anymore. He again struck out 12 batters per 9 innings, only 4 walks and only 4 hits. Batting average against him was 135. Right-handed batters hit 0.98 against him for the season. That's how dominant he was. And he was an all-star that year, made the all-star team. I remember a game from that year. It was a memory. I had to look it up. It was from April 22nd of that year against the Mets. I remember being at the game, and I saw him in one inning pitch one of the more dominant innings I can remember. He faced it was a Mets game. He faced David Wright, Carlos Beltran, and Carlos Delgado in order, in their primes, right? And he made them look like children. Like he was throwing 95 mile an hour four-seamer, and then he would come back and pull a string, and the next pitch would be 67. And Beltran was way in front of it, swinging, and I just remember sitting there thinking, this guy's really, 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 really good. And he was, right. He said 0.98 against him that year. In 2010, he did assume the closer position for the Cubs. He saved 38 games. He finished 70 games for the Cubs that year, which is quite a few. Had a 255 earned run average. He set a Major League Baseball record for the most strikeouts per 9 innings among qualified pitchers, 16 Ks per 9. Eric Gagne held the previous record, FYI. Walked 6 guys per 9, which is a little bit high, but again, only gave up 4.5 hits per 9 innings, so it worked out pretty well. In 2011, he saved 34 games, but he also blew 10 saves. And then in 2012, he saved 20 games. Problem was the walks really started to become an issue. And you know, many of us think back on Marmol and we think of him as like this hot and cold guy. He was really more like he was really hot and then he was cold. You know, he was really dominant for the first several years, and then, you know, those last 3 years of the Cubs in 2011, 2012, and part of 2013 before they traded him to the Dodgers, he was averaging giving up 7 walks per 9. That's pretty hard to do as a relief pitcher and get away with.
I would remember him. He was able to walk the bases loaded and then strike out the side, and like very frequently.
The Cubs ended up trading to the Dodgers for Matt Gurrier. Remember that name?
Cubs legend.
Cubs legend. Sadly, he finished his career in 2014 with Miami Marlins at the age of 31. Today, as I sit here, Carlos Marmol is 42 years old. Does that blow your mind?
Wow.
Yeah.
Guy from the 06 team. He's 42 today. Wow. I mean, I would have thought he was 50, right? Like, I mean, come on. Like, how is that possible? He had a just a remarkable career in that he wasn't a pitcher until he was, and then he went straight to the majors, and then he was like MLB record setting good
dominant stretch.
Yeah. And then he suffered from, as we talked about, the walks. Still struck out a lot of guys, but the walks, you know, killed him. They say walks will kill you. They really did for him. And then he was out of baseball, just like that. It's a really meteoric ascent and descent. For his career, he struck out 11.6 batters per 9, walked 6.2, a little bit high, gave up 6 hits. He is among Cubs all-time save leaders. He is third. He has the third most saves in Cubs history, behind 2 Hall of Famers. Can you name one of them?
I'm assuming Suter.
Suter was number 2. Number 1
is Eckersley number 1?
As a Cub.
Lee Smith then.
Lee Smith, yeah. Eckersley didn't bother saving games until after he was.
You got to remember that's like as that I was just coming of age as, you know, a human when Eckersley was on the Cubs. So
he was a starting pitcher
in the dark.
Yeah. So it goes Lee Smith, Bruce Sutter, Carlos Marmol. That surprised me a little.
Crazy, yeah.
I would have thought Rod Beck would have snuck in there, or Kerry Wood. Somebody would have snuck in there, right?
Joe Borowski, anybody,
right? So that is the story of Carlos Marmol. When I look back at the whole body of work, I leave aside the frustrations of the walks, you know, because that we all lived through that painful part of it. Mm-hmm. But I try to remember the fact that he was such an improbable pitcher to begin with, given where he started and how he wasn't a pitcher at all. And so it's pretty remarkable that he rose to the levels that he did. So kudos to him for being able to do that.
An interesting story, an interesting pick. Great job, Jared, with the Carlos Marmol pick. James, last time you chose Derek Lee, and that was super fun. Who is your choice this time?
That was you?
That was back. Yeah, I did pick Derek Lee. I hadn't wanted to originally, and then I just couldn't help myself because it was just to talk about Sammy Sosa and then being like, hey, Derek Lee's getting into the Cubs Hall of Fame too. Like,
It was a fun one.
It was fun.
Wanted to give him his due. Yeah,
we gave him his flowers. Yeah, it was great.
You know, I wanted to kind of transpose the fun that you guys had with that pick and go to one that was kind of instrumental in teaching me about not like the, you know, mind-breaking heartbreak of like, you know, the Leon Durham ball through the legs, the Steve Bartmans of the world. No, not that level of heartbreak, but just the kind of subtle kick in the nuts that is being a Chicago Cubs fan. And to me, it was a player that I just consistently wanted to see on the field, and for one reason or another just would end up getting hurt or being ineffective or whatever it was. And then you'd have these beautiful shining moments like you saw like in the 1989 season or in 1995 when he drove in 69 runs. I am talking about Sean Dunston, who was one of my first favorite Cubs players and who I always insisted, man, if that guy can play often, he's going to be an absolute force. And yet I would so often end up being disappointed, although with some, good memories sprinkled in there. So with that in mind, I'm going to pick Mr. Sean Dunston.
That's an excellent pick.
Excellent,
I don't know if you know this, but good friend of the show is the originator of the Shawnometer.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man,
Friend of the show. Yes.
That is awesome.
Many games with. Maybe we'll get a couple words from him on his favorite Sean.
It's really funny because like part of becoming a Cubs fan is like kind of learning about the history of the team. And back when I was growing up, in the Stone Age, we did not have things like YouTube to go back and watch like video clips of guys. So a lot of the formative reason why I became such a big Sean Dunston fan was because basically for an entire off season, I made my mom and dad continually rent a videotape of the 1989 division-winning Chicago Cubs from Blockbuster, and I ran that thing into the ground, and I was like, man, Sean Dunston is awesome. So, yeah, that was one of my formative Cub memories, was being thrilled and disappointed by that guy.
We did the 80
video of that, right?
We did the 84 Cubs last year. We chronicled the entire 84.
I remember, yeah.
If you want to listen, I put that all together in a super cut for anyone who wants to hear it. It's in the back catalog of this podcast or on YouTube. The 89 Cubs for me, James, was my formative Cubs team. That was my childhood team, and that was the one where I first liked the Cubs, was that 89 team. Like that was the
Boys of Zimmer.
Team. That's right.
I think that was the title of the video, as a matter of fact.
That definitely was. I know that video. I watched that video. You just unlocked a core memory for me, James, by telling me about that.
Yep. I literally
go ahead.
I was literally going to say that, like, we were talking before we came on about the fact that I've been wearing a different Cubs hat every day and putting it on Instagram, and we're getting toward the end of that. But the last hat that I'm going to end up doing is actually, I believe I got the hat during the 1989 season. It is a very, very, very small, very old, very beat up Cubs hat. And I identify that with that 1989 team. So I'm right there with you, Jeremy. Very formative memories as a Cubs fan, learning about that team and watching the players who had been on it.
And Jeremy, I'll reach out to Dave and try to get a little story on the Shawnometer origin.
Get a Shawnometer story for us. Absolutely.
Which any fan, if you're not familiar with the Shawnometer, just Google it. You'll see video of that out there.
Yep.
And James, with that, why don't you remind our listeners how they can follow you on the internet and follow your work?
Best places to find me are on NBC Chicago, of course. I write about a lot of different stuff extensively, including the Cubs. And obviously, I love little historical nuggets about the Cubs. So basically, anytime anything remotely interesting happens with them, I'm going to write about it on the site. I also do want to point out I am on Blue Sky at James Neveau. And if you want to see my insane collection of Cubs hats, which we were at 21 so far, got a lot of positive feedback about the Iowa caucuses hat that I have and a few other assorted goodies. That is my Instagram account. That is at Neveau Riche, NEVEAU RICHE. And wanted to tell you guys about this. I am embarking upon a new podcast venture with former NBC Sports Chicago colleagues Ken Davis and Josh Schrock. It is called 3 Men in a Podcast, and we broke down the Bears NFL draft. We're going to talk some Bears, talk some college sports of various kinds, and I'm going to continually try to force the issue to talk about baseball, and we'll see how that all goes.
Well, I will make sure that I go throw a subscribe to that podcast. Looking forward to that. And if you want to help our podcast, you can go throw us a subscribe and a like and such over at our YouTube channel. We're really trying to build up the YouTube numbers here. That's where the video version of this podcast can be found. Go to youtube.com, search for the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Give us a subscribe, like, helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. If you don't consume your podcast via the video medium, it still helps us out if you do it. But you can continue to stay subscribed via all the audio platforms that you currently listen to the podcast on. If it is Spotify, the video version is also available in addition to the audio version on your Spotify player as well, right there on your phone. Just magically it shows up there. And so with that, we are going to wrap it up. You can follow us on all the social media platforms as well, at Wrigleyville Nat. We love to hear about your thoughts on the current Cubs, Sean Dunston, Carlos Marmol, anything. If you want to interact with the show, make sure you're doing that via the social media channels at Wrigleyville Nat. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, James, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.